What's up, guys? This is Larry, and I'm doing a collab video of Frank, just kind of talking about smoking and kind of like the casual perspective and just kind of going over a few things. And I'm gonna kick it over to Frank, let him introduce himself.
Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy Franklin. This is the second time we do a collab video. You guys haven't checked out our first video. It was about why Pokemon are shiny locked and why Game Freak is full of shit. But yeah,
Yeah, we're just gonna kind of just go over like just kind of try to pick the brain and kind of understand why casual players, just like players in general, have like so much issues of smoking. And I know Frank has a screenshot he wants to show you guys, just to kind of give a brief little example.
yeah. So this is like I believe I was part of this group. Not the one this guy posted in, but there were several groups that this year crazy. They have people like sometimes they would be asking for battles and everything. And me personally, because I play Smogon rules, um, the rules are already preset, so you already know what to expect. But my man's here over here is just like banning everything. Like this guy is asking. He's a water type uh, leader, by the way, quote unquote leader, more like a sheep. And just looking at the rules, like he's like no manual switching. All right, that's what's up. I used to actually play back in the day with like no manual switching, which is I don't know why I was stupid back then.
Yeah, gentlemen's rules. I think that's what somebody called them.
Yeah, which is kind of odd because like U-turn, volt switch, and now teleport are pretty big in the competitive scene that isn't doubles. So there's that. Obviously, six Pokemon allowed. Of course, why would you run less than that? No legendaries or mythicals or UBs. Well, see, I don't know why. I never really had a problem with these Pokemon because some of them are extremely busted. Like there's Zaishen, there's Mega Rayquaza, there's the Primals, there's um, Pokemon like Formosa. But my man's here is just banning everything. Like Articuno is not good. Regice, not good, but whatever. No Shedinja. Yeah, my man
Yeah,
here is not running Crawdon apparently. No switch spamming with attacks. Constant baton pass. Okay. Baton pass is pretty much banned everywhere, but okay. No heal spamming. Well, you're just run a taunt, man. No stalling. I understand no stalling because the timer does suck in this generation, and we probably might discuss. Oh, actually, no. We already each of us had made a discussion about the timer being just trash in this generation. Why the competitive aspect in singles isn't that great right now. And he says, like, just like in ranked, there will be Pokemon who are banned. These are the following. We got Cinderace. I understand Cinderace to an extent. Poltegeist, alright, you just trash. Whimsicott, extra trash. Snorlax, yeah, that's garbage. Ditto, yeah, I don't know about that. Shuckle, I mean, my man, if you're having a problem with Shuckle, you gotta be playing Digimon at this point in time. Then you got Corsola. I don't know why Corsola. Actually, in the beginning, when the game came out, Corsola was not an issue, but it was kind of a pain to deal with. But then Dragapult came along and started
yeah.
ruling that.
Corso
So
was a beast when it first came out.
yeah, but now we got Toxic coming into the home, and then we have knockoff users increasing. So it's not really much of a problem anymore. And then Hatterene, I don't know why Hatterene is. Yeah, you just fucking trash. Band moves, you got Strength Sap. Okay, Stored Power. All right, Hypnosis. My man, you gonna ban a move that misses. All right, Sleep Powder, Shell Smash, and any multiple hit moves. That sounds like you're having a struggling. You're struggling with Corsola and Cloyster. You could have just banned Cloyster, whatever. But yet you have Gmax and Dynamax allowed. Like what? Like what? That makes absolutely zero sense to me. I mean, whatever. You must bring two Pokemon my team is weak to, and one Pokemon my team is strong to. The rest must be neutral. How dare you? How dare you call your prize the drip badge? If anything, you ain't got no drip with this fucking trash ass rule set. But see, now I understand from the casual perspective, like it's not supposed to be taken seriously. But just by looking at this and trying to build a team, this is what casual battling to me personally has kind of like disappeared in my point of view because when you have rules like that implemented, it just seems obviously it does scream casual, but at the same time it is so team restricting that you cannot build a team whatsoever. I understand the no legendaries part because everyone assumes legendaries are broken, even though clearly some of them are not. But the issue here is that people don't have an understanding of what's balanced and what's not balanced. And just because Game Freak sets the precedent, I should say, of what is allowed in a certain metagame, like for example in VGC or in singles, that doesn't necessarily mean that they know what's good for their own games. Because we've had metagames before where, for example, an official metagame that is VGC, where they had the primals and Mega Rayquaza allowed, and that was back in 2016 Worlds. So something like that is obviously not really a good sign that neither the casual, the ultra competitive, or the official competitive scene has a grasp of what truly makes Pokemon balanced. And I know I've talked a lot, so I'm gonna pass it over to Larry. I mean, I already shared him this post. He already seen this post, and I kind of baited the shit out of like all of his members in his group, so it was
Yeah,
pretty funny.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, it's the post isn't really to kind of like make fun of like the rules that casuals make. Just it's just more so to kind of show you guys this is kind of what happens when there aren't really regulated rules because people kind of go off of what really has issues with him and like yeah that kind of contradicts what Smogan does, but Smogan kind of does more so things that are community based. So that's why you have stuff like a suspect test because you see like especially Facebook is really bad about it. Whenever there's a suspect that comes up and people are like, oh yeah, Smogan bans everything, like they just ban what they can't beat. And like my argument always 90% of the time, like I open up with, hey, well, why don't you try to get Rex? And like that almost always ends the conversation because getting Rex basically means you enter into the ladder and you win enough to be able to vote. And trying to like compare like the win rate of like a Smogan vote compared to like ranked, because like ranked master rank is what like you can have like a losing record of like 40 to 60 and you'll still be master rank and people really take that and fluff it up. But with like Smogan Rex to actually be able to vote, you have to be good. So you got a win loss ratio of maybe like what did you have, Frank? Like
I had
for the
so basically at minimum you can go 30 and 0, and you
yeah.
will have both Rex in terms of battles played and voting. Well, not voting. The GXC, which is the percentage or the odds of you winning against a random person. I'm actually going to pull up my Rex um, vote up here soon. Let me show that. But essentially, I had to go 38 and 5 because I had to essentially make up for the wins for the poor losses that I have. So if you lose like in the lower ladder, like you get punished severely. And the way the ladder works um, in this generation, every loss that you have to make it up for 2 wins. So it really does bring out the best in you and possibly the worst because the suspect laddering to me is a lot difficult than just regular laddering where you are pressured to not lose essentially. And that's just my opinion, and I've this is my second time completing Rex. So I do. So my opinion actually does count cuz
Yeah.
my vote actually does matter because I have a say, and that's why I always like talk about what people complain about. I think the biggest complaint in Generation 8 was when Dynamax got banned and people were
Yeah.
just throwing a fit, and it's like the biggest argument that I saw was like, well, it's just the new metagame. Like, what do you mean? Like, why are we banning something that is just new? And Smogon actually has a dedicated thread towards that, and I suggest you guys should read that. Um, Simply because something is introduced in a game doesn't necessarily mean that it's balanced. Because as soon as Dynamax, for example, in this case, was allowed for like a good whole month before Smogon banned it, um, everyone was running Gyarados, everyone was running Hawlucha, everyone was running Ditto, which was supposed to be
It
the
was
counter
so
to.
toxic.
It was supposed to be the counter to Dynamax, but it ended up being a very problematic Pokemon. And the fact that over 50% of teams, I believe the end number was like about 51% of all teams were using Ditto at a certain point, just basically meant that something was clearly wrong. And it wasn't the Pokemon itself, it was just the overall mechanic. And I don't blame them for eventually banning that kind of stuff because it's just very, very unhealthy for the casual and the ultra competitive environment.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, because and that's what I mean. Like when you said the getting Rex, it's basically if you want people to decide kind of who ban stuff. I mean, you want to be people that are good. Like you don't want to be arbitrary. And a reason, like whenever there's like a suspect or ban for smoking, people get really up in arms. And I believe it's because it's a lack of understanding. And one of the big things is like I tell people like, hey, VGC banned stuff too. And like they're like, well, VGC is official. And like that's kind of yes, that is true. But like if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, these are more so arbitrary bans. And a lot of the bans happen and people don't really care because they're legendaries. Because I mean, usually the average, I mean, the and this is me really trying to talk down on more casual players, but a lot of times they're the ones that are scared of legendaries. They're like, yeah, legendaries are broken, they're cheap wins and all this other stuff. So that's why they don't take issue with like VGC having bans because I mean they're usually legendaries. And it just kind of comes with like that learning curve of like competitive to kind of one of the biggest steps and like especially with Smogan helping out with that with tiers and stuff is like you learn that like not all legendaries are bad. Like I tell people like, so what about Cosmog? Yeah, we that's broken too. That's cheap. Like you use that, you're like you have no skill. And I'm just like, yo, like you guys really gotta kind of expand your horizon. And that's one of the things that like smoking helps with. Like you kind of you get like a lot of like articles and forum posts posted every time and like a lot of interactive things going on. But like for us it's just kind of like we never really understand why there's a lot of hate for smoking. Like yeah, there's toxic members, like trust me, I know some that are toxic, but for the most part, I mean, smoking just kind of the page, at least they post their stuff on their page, don't really bother anybody. But if you go to anything that's like remotely about a band and it's not a legendary, the comments are typically full of people just smoking bans everything like they're not official. And like yeah, smoking's not official, they know they're not
Right.
official, they state that they're not official, but people still feel the need to kind of go out of their way and just like go bash on another community when like it you don't have to participate. Like I mean, I play smoking, Frank plays smoking, but at the same time like I'm not sitting here as like it's not smoking versus VGC. Like if somebody in like Central is looking for VGC help, my things, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and find somebody that plays VGC that can help you out, or I'm going to find the resources. I'm not going to just scroll over and be like, nah, he don't play the game I play. And that's kind of what we see happening because a
Right.
lot of the people that bash on Smogan, they usually aren't competitive at all. And like I've brought it up several times, like, hey, when we do a VGC tournament, like, and you try to claim that you're like, oh yeah, I play VGC, they don't participate in tournaments. When we do competitive discussions, they don't participate at all. And it just kind of it really makes it feel bad because even prominent VGC players, they kind of get annoyed by it because it makes them look bad. When it's just like if you're casual, I mean, just try to learn things and like get an understanding rather than attack. And I just kind of rambled for a bit, so I'm gonna kick it back to Frank, see like his input on it.
Yeah, so another thing you have to note as well, regardless whether you're competitive or casual, is that oftentimes, um, even OU players actually jump ship into BGC. I think the biggest example is Nails. He's a very prominent, he's a pretty much a prominent tour player among Smogon, and he's actually has peaked quite a bit in VGC. I believe it was Generation 7 is where he actually was winning tournaments. So the idea that, these ultra competitive scenes aren't necessarily like isolated within each other. Like it goes like it's pretty much is a two-way street. And as to what Larry was saying, like I would like to add on to that and say that oftentimes the opinions of other people is based on one person. For example, there's this PokeTuber out there that likes to talk smack about Smoke on OU. We all know who he is. I ain't gonna say him because
Yeah,
I ain't gonna give him clout. But
yeah,
you
he
know,
must not be named.
once he makes an opinion, like his little followers or whatever start spreading that toxic knowledge without even discussing like what's the real issue with X, Y, and Z or so and so. And so it's better to form your own opinion, and yet you want to gain knowledge of metagames in Pokemon based on the ideas of people, but those people have to have clout and they have to have tournament succession. If a top player is saying that something is broken, or if a council leader of OU or if a VGC, maybe Wolfie, because I know Wolfie is very prominent right now. If he says something is broken and they should do something about it, then people are going to listen and people are going to take
Yeah.
that into perspective because obviously he is a world champion. Or the council leader of OU is a tier leader, and obviously their opinions have more merit than those who just blindly sign up their accounts like 2 days ago and they're just making these kind of comments without having any laddering success, without having any tour success, any contributions to their own respective metagames. And unfortunately, you cannot separate the casual from specific groups because groups like Facebook, while we do try to get people more competitive, whether it's by running tournaments or by having general discussions about Pokemon, um, it turns out there are certain platforms where that may not be outweighed from other groups. Like for example, Smogon's group, and obviously I'm gonna put up the website because I'm already there. Like this group is pretty much very competitive in all aspects of Pokemon. Even they even actually have cartridge formats, which is VGC, singles, and what I like about Smogon, and I always will be biased towards Smogon because they're one of the first unofficial competitive formats that I played in since 2016, is that they talk about everything related to Pokemon, whether it's different tiers, how the tiering aspect works, who's responsible for metagame changes, are there official tournaments that you can run into, because they have actually they have two of them going on right now, and if you have criticism you want for your team, you can put in the rate my team section. You care about Wi-Fi and giveaways. They give away free Pokemon too on Wi-Fi, which is something I dipped my toes into roughly about 2 3 years ago, and it always helps. If you want to contribute into Pokemon analysis, where you get your articles featured in the decks, I've done that I believe 3 times already. Um, you can always help them out. You got an interesting article about in-game stuff like characters and mechanics. I've done that as well with the Flying Press, and they're not specifically. And if you don't want to talk about Pokemon, they have other stuff to talk about, like sports, because they always love to talk about that in the congregation of the masses. But that's why I kind of like Smogon, because it helps you challenge your ideals as to what's good in Pokemon right now and how to pretty much overall perform against high level competitive play. Because the one criticism that I always have with casual versus competitive play is that the best player that plays casually will always can lose to the simple. Actually, I kind of butchered that, but I'll say it again. So,
It's all good.
so I guess it's kind of a weird um, analogy, but the very best casual player of all time can lose to somebody who's new to Smogon. And what I
Yep.
mean by that is that while you can set up your own rules to battles and do whatever you want, you're at the moment you face up against someone who has a basic understanding as to how tiering and how predictions and how rulings and how battles work, that the highest casual player will instantly lose no matter what, because their game plan is specifically fixed on so many rules and a lack of a true understanding of what a metagame is, compared to someone who started out in Smogon. They get to learn things very quickly. They understand how Pokemon works, their battle mechanics that they take to the fullest advantage. And that Smogon player, regardless if he's been on there for 1 or 2 days or for 10 years, will always outplay that person no matter what, because that's just how it works. And I guess the last thing I like to talk about is pretty much the bashing between casuals and Smogon.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny how the casuals usually bash Smogon on a regular basis, but when it comes to Smogon versus the casual side, like there really isn't any bashing whatsoever. In my 4 years of playing Pokemon, I ever yet to see any Smogon players like talking down on casuals. And yeah, you know there could be a toxic fan base in Pokemon. I mean, there always has been. There's no denying about that, but the same could be said of different competitive games. I'm pretty sure Smash Ultimate is way worse than Pokemon. Um, any other fighting games like Dragon Ball Z and all those other fighting games, there's always going to be a toxic fan base. So that argument kind of gets just get thrown out the window.
Yeah, kind of like what Frank just said. Like it is like usually don't see any bashing from smoking players on casuals. Usually, what happens is like you'll see smoking players will like I can make a post in like Central or like I'll see a post in another group and they'll say, "Hey, for the smoking players," and then next you know 90% of the people that comment are not smoking players and they go to the comment section, they pick fights, and then when the smoking players kind of shut them down with evidence, they're like, oh, you're being toxic. And I'm just kind of like, yo, like that's not how this works. Like you came here to argue with people, and then like I mean, usually for the sake of like not having to deal with things, a lot of times smoking players will, I mean, will explain things. We'll be like, hey, so this is why this got banned. And then a lot of times we get hit back with combativeness. And it's just kind of like we'll either stop talking or we'll keep trying to explain. And then they're like, oh yeah, you're talking down to me and all this other stuff. And like it comes from just like a lack of understanding because a lot of people try to use like anecdotal evidence. Like I
Right.
saw a guy that said like, yeah, my Salazzle is so much better than like an Urshifu S. Hopefully he doesn't watch this video because he'll probably flame me in the comment. Well, no, I don't really care, but like so stuff like that happens a lot because people use anecdote. They'll be, yeah, I kill it in one hit. It's no issue. Blah 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 blah. And I'm just like, yo, like that's because smoking bans are usually based around a competent player using the mod because people are like, yeah, well, Urshifu dies to a fairy attack every time, and I'm like, okay, so if you had an Urshifu against a like a let's say a Clefable, would you stay in? No. That's the whole point. You got to realize like nobody's going to stay in on something that beats it, and people a lot of times don't understand checks and counters, and that is one of the big things. Because I've seen people say Focus Sash is a counter. That's not a counter,
Right.
and it really cracks me up. And like one of the prime examples of a band that kind of exposed a lot of hypocrisy and misunderstanding was Dracovic. So when
Mm,
Dracovic got banned, a lot of people were like, "Well, just carry water absorb," and that is the whole reason why it was banned. Well, not the whole reason, but part of it because if you have to bring a mon to your team for the sole purpose of it countering one mon that might not actually be there, that is what's called centralizing. And a lot of people don't understand that. You can't if you have to bring up a mind, like if it's something that's prominent and like already been around and stuff like that, that's a whole different aspect. But when you're bringing up what was it that rose to OU because of Darmanitan and Dracovic, Seismitoad, right?
yeah, it was Seismitoad, and then Rotom. Well, when Darmanitan was around, it was Rotom Heat.
Yeah. Like Rotom Heat wasn't really so much of an issue because I mean it still was viable for other things, but Seismitoad's rose just to kind of deal with those two mons. And then now that those two mons are gone, I think Seismitoad's back in like NU or RU right now. And that kind
Yeah.
of shows you like the centralization of things. And a lot of people don't really understand that because they take it as like, okay, well, I beat this random trainer and he had the same thing and I won, so it's not that bad. But you like I said, you have to understand that it comes down to competent players. Like if you're playing against randoms or if you're playing it on like Facebook leagues and stuff like that, usually the level of competitiveness is not the same. Like yeah, you do have some smoking groups out there, but typically like a lot of gym league groups, they're usually super casual and it kind of kicks back to what Frank said earlier about like somebody that is like top dog in a Facebook group will lose to like somebody who just started smoking. And that's true because a lot of people that are and I've seen it numerous times myself, people that'll go around, they're the best in their Facebook group and like they only play around their friends and they've got like this inflated ego and then they lose to somebody who's bottom of the ladder and smoking because this person that's playing smoking they're actually trying to learn, they're learning basic mechanics and stuff like that. Like they learned it like you need stuff like in singles you need stuff like stealth rocks, you need stuff like spikes and like a defogger. Well, I was like this person that is playing and they're a champ of their league and they go off and they use like stuff like what physical Gengar because
Yeah.
like they want to they want to catch stuff off guard. I also saw one dude. This was maybe a few years back. You could just like be talking to your in a comment section with two people about smoking, and he would come out of nowhere and just start bashing on it. Like, yeah, I'm the best in my group, and like I always win. Like I use unique stuff, and then like one of my an old friend of mine that was probably he wasn't even that good of a player, just destroyed him. And the dude was using Life Orb Shed Ninja. If you know me, I always bring up the Life Orb Shed Ninja story when I talk about Smoking Bashers because it's stuff like this because it makes no sense. Like you don't like and again, you don't have to play Smoking. It's just the
Right.
fact of the matter is like it's not official. We understand it's not official. If you don't want to play, you don't have to play. If you're interested in learning, always ask questions. But when people just go around and just blatantly just attack something without asking questions, like it gets we're not the toxic ones, and people got to really understand that. Like, yeah, you might see some of us kind of like get a little annoyed after we've kind of repeated ourselves like 10, 15 times, but like we're not the toxic ones because like we're on in our own little circle talking amongst ourselves, saying posts about these topics that we all enjoy together, and then next thing we know, you guys are trash. You guys are bad. Like I saw one person post yesterday. He was like, "Well, banning anything in a competitive game that's quitter talk," and I'm thinking like, "Yo, like no, it's the same dude from the post earlier that I'm talking
Jesus.
about,
Oh God.
and like it's stuff like that. He's like, that'd be quitter talk, and I post. I'm like, yo, so Magic band stuff, Yu-Gi-Oh band stuff, literally anything competitive has some form of bans into designed to kind of regulate things. And all Smogan is doing it's using community involvement to try and do this to help things better for people that want to play singles metagame. And I'm gonna stop ranting here, and I'm gonna kick it back over to Frank, see what he's got to say.
Yeah, and so like when we're talking about casuals in the community, like we're not even talking about battles in general. I mean, we are, but it also encompasses like shiny hunters, breeders, people that just like doing the extra curricular activity on their little cartridges or whatever. And I'm pretty much gonna say it right now. I know this is gonna be a kind of left field, but whenever you talk shit in Pokemon, karma is just right there, bro. Like don't do it because I remember like a lot of people who are like the from the casual side of everything just happen to talk so much for no reason, by the way. And then when they face people like me or Larry or other people and they get shut down 6-0'd, Wi-Fi DC'd, all that, man, I'm just gonna say like from that perspective, like just if you're going to argue with someone, at least have a common background knowledge. Because when there's discussion about a Pokemon or a specific mechanic being suspect tested or banned in any type of competitive format, um, people say, well, it's not broken, like Larry mentioned. Well, it's not broken because so and so can counter it, or this item helps out. But see, the problem is you got to understand that it takes more than just that. You got to understand a couple things. For example, like one, what's the usage of other Pokemon looking like? Because I know, and no matter what format you're playing in, there's always going to be at least 6 to 10 Pokemon that are like used the most. And you have to understand, well, those Pokemon can only check or counter that Pokemon for X amount of times before it starts becoming much more of a problem. The other thing, and I think this generation kind of exposed a little bit of this, is the DLC. Because in the beginning, the very beginning of time of Sword and Shield, we only had about 400 Pokemon, and we only had a specific amount of Pokemon to counter so and so. And when we mentioned our Manitan, the Galarian form, of course, it was beyond broken because it's straight up. There's only like about one, maybe two Pokemon off the top of my head that can truly counter a monster of that magnitude. And so once we have more Pokemon coming in and the return of Toxic and other moves from home and eventual DLC waves, then the metagame starts becoming a little more versatile. And so that's the kind of stuff that you have to understand. Just because something is broken doesn't mean there's only one reason why it's broken. Like I guess Urshifu, not Urshifu. Yeah, Urshifu was the most recent one that just got banned in OU, and I had the opportunity to vote in it because I got the Rex. And while I understand why people want to keep it, like we have Fat Fairies in the metagame, um, it's still 2 KOs the entire metagame that isn't fairy or
Yep.
fighting, and you might be wondering, well, isn't Wicked Blow the problem? And you could argue, yeah. I mean, I can argue it too. Like, yeah, Wicked Blow technically is the problem, but the issue with it is just more than that. because Pokemon that are faster than Urshifu now have to play the mind games of Sucker Punch. You have Dragapult, which actually went down in usage because of Urshifu and Magearna to a certain extent. And I don't want to get the casuals mad, but Magearna might be suspect tested next, depending on what happens later
Well,
on.
remember, Magearna's a legendary, so nobody's gonna care.
Right?
And that's
it's a mythical, so you might not even have
yeah,
it in your cartridge right now, so you might not even care.
and like
Um,
that's
yeah, and
that's just how it is. Like, my
yeah,
bad.
go for it, yeah,
Yeah, and that's just how kind of things are. Like I said before, like usually, I mean, when things are, and that's the casual perspective, legendary, mythical's bad. So whenever something like that gets banned or suspect tested, they don't care. But when it's like their favorite starter, like, oh my god, like it gets so toxic while we're sitting there trying to game plan, like, hey, what's the meta gonna be like without this? What's the meta gonna be like if it still stays? And but then we got to deal with like people trying to go at our throats over something that like they could literally read an article about or ask questions instead, like they just go immediately to attack. And like that's the whole thing. Like we still, I mean, we kind of understand. I think people probably, I mean, after listening to it, they kind of understand the perspective that we're trying to get off. It's like it's mainly people who don't understand. Like they aren't really as competitive as they feel. And I think for a lot of people, smoking kind of brings a shock to them a bit because it kind of, especially like the latter, it kind of puts them into like a place knowing where they stand.
yeah,
Because a lot of times I'll see people, and this might kind of go off on a tangent. People that play on like on Switch or cart is what we call it, they usually are super behind on the metas. Like if you were playing in like XY, like around like maybe mid XY, which is honestly one of the best metas ever. If you played
yeah,
somebody on Switch, I mean, on the 3DS, 90% of the time they would use pretty standard sets, and like you could catch them off guard by using things in a meta that is more evolved. So they would see whenever they see Lando, they think it's Scarf Lando, but
yeah,
then they get caught off they get caught off guard when they see like a double dance Lando or like any other variant, a defensive, and the same thing with like was it Talonflame. When they see Talonflame, they think, okay, Choice Bandit Braveheart, spam, and then you hit him with the Spadef Wisp Stallbreaker T Flame, and they're like they're blown back, and that's
yeah,
just that's kind of how things are. Like people, I think it's people don't really they don't want to feel left behind and inferior. So instead, they attack and try to make the thing that they're attacking seem inferior. And it kind of just goes down to like a person kind of thing. Like
right,
it's all, if you want to get better, it's not hard to get better. It is
right,
not a hard thing to get better at this game. Like it's a very easy game to once you start playing competitive. And I'm not saying like you play a few days, you're a master. No, I mean, but some people once they do finally start playing competitively, they grasp it really easy because they understand it. Like if you're good with like chess and stuff like that, it you really can grasp smoking a bit better because like it's I mean 6 months. There's a lot more switching. There's a lot more calculating, and there you don't have the beauty of like double targeting like VGC does. So every turn means something. So it's like you got to really think things through and like think about like the long game. Like let's say like you have something now you're trying to get chip damage on things with stealth rocks like sand. That way that your thing that scarf can come back later on and sweep, because if you go and try to sweep too early, you might lose it. And then now what are you gonna do? Now you have to rely on the other mons, and like you kind of put yourself in a bad spot. And like that's kind of like what Smogan does with like the guides and the resources they put and like everything. They're designed to help you get better and like improve your game overall. But let me kick it back to Frank, see what he's got to say about it.
yeah. And the other thing I noticed too is that people like Larry talked about the mindset of having these old metagames, um, challenge them to a certain perspective. Like you gotta understand. I guess from my experience, people complain about Lando like it's nobody's fucking business,
Oh my god.
and people will say, "Well, Lando has been around in OU for one, two, three, four, what was it four? Wait, five, six, seven? Yeah, so about four generations, which is, yeah, it's like almost 10 years. Jesus Christ!" And people complain about Lando, like they don't understand that just because Lando was introduced in Gen 5 doesn't necessarily mean it's broken in Gen 8. Like it doesn't make any sense to me because you gotta understand from from the perspective of separate metagames, because Generation 5 metagame is completely different from Generation 6. 6 is different from 7, and 7 is different from 8, and so on and so forth. And um, I will admit, from the casual perspective, like I kind of didn't like Lando in Generation 7, because I think that's when the metagame was pretty much stale for about 2 years, because there was no new Pokemon introduced, and even the Pokemon that were introduced, like Zeraora, didn't really make a difference in the metagame at that time. So I was those people that complained about Lando all the time. I complained about Pex, which I think Pex is even more dumber than Lando, from all my time battling. Um, but people have to understand, like, just because a Pokemon's used all the time doesn't necessarily mean it's broken. Sure, they could be annoying, and sure, you gotta prep your team a little bit for those Pokemon, but once you understand that there's certain patterns with it, like everyone likes using Lando, then start running something that goes against Lando. Or you're having speed problems against a certain Pokemon, then start running speed creeping Pokemon. Um, or even so, like, I guess for like Pokemon like Magearna and all that stuff, then start running Volcarona. Like some stuff like that. While it does sound like I'm kind of centralizing a certain metagame, there's multiple ways you can counter a specific Pokemon. Now, of course, if Lando ended up getting something like Roost, obviously it's going straight
Oh
banned
my,
because
yeah,
there's no way
yeah,
it's gonna stay in
that's
for
too
that
much.
long. Um, and but from I guess from the Gen 7 perspective, like let's see. I think Z moves were kind of like pushing a lot of Pokemon to the edge, which I kind of understand why Lando was in the talks of a lot of people, like because Z moves pushed Pokemon into killing a Pokemon that they were not supposed to in the first place. Like Z Fly Lando killed a bunch of Pokemon like Tangrowth, and you wouldn't be able to do that from the get go in today's meta games. And the other thing I like to discuss about is well, it seems like we're bashing the the casual community more, but it's not even that. It's just more of a how to stop spreading misinformation amongst the people. The reason why there's a lot of divide, I mean, the Pokemon community, is because there's a true lack of understanding of what's going on within other communities. Just because you're good at battling in your little master rank doesn't necessarily translate to Showdown on the ladder, because those are two completely different meta games and they're two different playstyles with various parameters that are different amongst each other. For example, on Master Rank, it's 3v3. On Ladder, it's 6v6, and they're two completely different um, approaches into playing. Because the way you play 6v6, like sure you can understand how metagames work. The way you play does not translate very well to 3v3, because not only you have a limited timer, but the Pokemon in themselves are either allowed or not allowed in various metagames. And so, just because you pull up with your OU team doesn't necessarily mean you can translate to victories in 3v3. And the same thing and vice versa. Just because you're good at 3v3 doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good in 6v6, because now in 6v6 you got to worry about the long game. You got to worry about your win cons, preserving. Then you got hazards, because hazards aren't really a thing in 3v3 as far as I'm concerned. Maybe rocks, but that's pretty much it. And so if you're able to just learn, and that's what we're trying to get at you guys, just learn about what you're dealing with, who you're dealing with, what Pokemon is, because like Larry said, Pokemon isn't really that hard to learn. It does take a while for you to master, because um, there's there's stuff like the casual player, and then there's the intermediate player, which understands what they're doing, but that doesn't necessarily translate to tour wins. And then there's the ultra high like competitive players that you'll hear their names in specific communities because they're proven winners. They're great at team building. They contribute to their own communities. And so, if you learn from the very best, obviously, the learning potential for anyone, regardless of whether you're casual or not, is always very high. Because someone like me, for example, when I started playing Smogon in 2016, right when I got back into Pokemon in late ORAS, like I learned a lot about Pokemon through Smogon. more so than my next Facebook group or whatever that I'm admitting right now. And I learned a lot about suspect testing, why they do it, who's responsible for creating such metagames. And then it took me, believe it or not, my first suspect test that I uh, started was with Pheromosa in Generation 7. And I did pretty bad because while I do understand how Pokemon works and how to win, the issue is I didn't really define my skills to the point that I can win on a consistent basis. So I did pretty bad. So then I Generation 7 to me was like I started learning more about teams and different archetypes and what's good and what's not, what's very gimmicky and what's very standard. And then it took me nearly 2 generations up to now to fully understand like how Pokemon works, what's the mindset of going into a match every time. And I think what pushed me over the edge in regards to winning more and more consistently, like for example with these two suspect tests that I just recently completed, which were for Pheromosa and Urshifu, was knowing how to go into a match with a clear mindset. Because as soon as you start battling with any distractions, you're not gonna win. And I actually learned like some people have actually like used music to just ladder. I just can't do that, for example. So
Yeah, same. I
that
can't.
that that kind of perspective will help you as a player grow more. And you don't even have to be a battler. You can just be doing casual stuff like shiny hunting, shiny breeding, and all that good stuff. But once you have a true, full conventional understanding of what goes on in Mons, you can set your mind to do pretty much anything. Now, obviously, if you're not the person who doesn't like playing Smogon but likes doing casual rules, just bear in mind like don't restrict team building. That's always been my my gripe when it comes to playing leagues. I've been playing a lot of gym leagues back in the day, and I remember there was this one guy. Good lord, this guy was a little story time for you guys. There's this one guy who ran a water type gym, and the only thing he banned, I believe he banned like it was like two super effective mons, which that's usually the standard for a bunch of casual gym leagues. And I think they banned like mythic. I mean, they banned like legendaries, like mythicals, UBs, which is whatever. So I'm like, hmm. Actually, sorry, it was a mono bug gym league, so, or league gym. So I was like, cool. I'm just gonna bring Pelipper. I'm gonna bring Rain. I'm gonna bring Alolan Raichu and see what's up. So now I whooped his ass pretty badly. It was a 6. It wasn't even much of a challenge because once I got rocks up, everything, all the sashes, which by the way, people love running sashes. They get broken, and then I just spamming Hurricane or just spamming Thunder and all that. So then I finished that challenge, and then as soon as I finished that challenge, this guy, the bug gym leader, had the audacity of changing his rules and adding no weather and no rocks. And actually, no, sorry, he had
Right.
it. He said no weather, and I'm like, bro, you really gonna ban weather but not rocks? Like rocks is the reason why you lost. Rocks is why. Well, this is Gen 7, so it kind of makes sense why. But just seeing like your weaknesses to your team and just straight out banning it doesn't make you any better than the person that just challenged you. And
But
so
yeah, I mean,
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
all right. But yeah, it's just like you said. Like, I mean, you'll go into other gym leagues and stuff like they'll be super anti-smoking and like they use more so rules that kind of are designed more to handicap rather than to balance. Because I mean, I've been banned from several groups for winning a gym league because I mean it kind of like exposed the fact that like their rules are more so handicaps as opposed to actual to try and get people better. And that's one of the
Right.
issues with a lot of different Facebook groups. Like it's and it's not Facebook. I mean, Discord groups are the same way too. It's just more so they usually are all anti-smoking, but they hit you with a bunch of different rules to, like I said, more to handicap more than
Mhm.
actually balance and actually help. Like, and Another thing you also see is like, I mean, especially for Central, I mean, it's not as much as a problem now as it used to be, but back when we were mainly just a competitive group, like we would have people that would not compete in our tourneys. We'd see them in other groups competing in tourneys because they would compete in places where they felt more comfortable that they could win. And
Yep.
I think as far as like competitive goes, I mean, I think this thing is turned more into like why you should get into competitive minds instead of like why do people hate smoking than anything. But like I think you should always like test yourself. Like always play somebody better. Like don't try to play in elements where you can win. I mean, I've known Darius for probably almost like 7 years. I've probably beat him twice in those 7 years. But no matter what, I will always play him because I can. It's more like without him saying a word, by the turns I can kind of pick his brain and see like what he's doing and get
Right.
like further insight and stuff like that. And like that's what a lot of people kind of like lack. They don't want to hear negative feedbacks. I mean, people will post imports and stuff like that, or replays, and they don't like when you to hear they're like, yeah, you might have a flaw that can be addressed. Like, no, it's been working. I'm like, if it's been working, you wouldn't really be asking for help. And that's another issue. And I think that's like I said, it's more of like a person issue as opposed to just like minds the game, because a lot of people really don't want to look outside themselves and see that they need improvement. And
Right.
that's where, I mean, a lot of the smoke and bashing comes from, because I think for them in their head, like trying to bash on VGC seems stupid because VGC is official. They can't really sit there and they can't talk to these people, as opposed to like Smogan, like you kind of, it's not that you're talking to Smogan when you talk to like people like me and Frank. It's just more like, because it is something as a community, you are, I mean, the Smogan is the community. So when you're talking to like members and stuff like that, you kind of do get like that give and take, and you kind of do get like some insight because we actually do participate in it, because we sit there, we battle to get Rex to be able to vote, like, and all kinds of stuff like that. Like, yeah, you do have things that like quick bans that are council decisions, but the council is all made up of really great players, and it's usually based on things where it's like, it's going to get banned pretty much. Like, I know a lot of people, like he said with Urshifu, they say, well, just ban Wicked Blow. Like, that's a complex ban, and that would kind of make the whole mod inferior. So it's just like they get rid of the whole mod just for the sake of like to maintain balance overall. And the
Yeah.
thing is, like, everything, if you think about it, is truly banned somewhere. Because I mean, if you think about it, like everything in OU is banned in UU, RU, NU, ZU, PU. Everything in UU is banned from the tiers below that, but people, they ignore that. People, once they see OU, which is more common minds, that's when they get all upset. And I hear a lot of times people say like, "Well, having tiers is stupid," and I'm like, having tiers is probably like one of the best things you can have possibly, because for all these people who want to use their favorites and stuff, where like their favorites can't really compete, tiers are designed to give your favorites a place where they can compete and be balanced, and not like they be a hindrance to your team. So
Right.
like when people say stuff like tiers are bound like broken and stuff like that, and like, well, not broken but make no sense, I'm just kind of like, well, you're not really understanding the whole concept of tiering. Because, and this is me making an attack on VGC, but like if you look at VGC, VGC is, you pretty much have a certain amount of like maybe 40 mods that are widely used. Or if you go back, what was it, XY with chalk,
Yep.
like you saw every single team in the top had only a difference of, it was a range of maybe 10 mons that they used. And that's what
Right.
kind of happens with VGC, because there's no tearing, and there's no other ways of balance, because some of those mons would, I mean, I think they're removed in doubles OU, but they're still allowed in VGC, because VGC does more so arbitrary bans, because it's like it's designed to just get rid of box legendaries and other legendaries like that. And like I was really hoping that VGC would kind of remain the course when they did the ban of like the, what was it, the top 15 used mons,
Yeah, it was top
and they
15
were,
most used mons from both singles and doubles. So if all those mons had the highest amount of usage, they were both banned in singles and doubles, which is strange because you would think that they would ban top 10 in singles and then another top 10 or top
yep.
15 in doubles, but to each its own.
The thing is, like, a lot of people were actually excited about. They're like, yeah, like we don't got to see the same mons, and like us smoking players are sitting here like, man, we've been doing this for a while, and y'all have hated us for it. Like this is why, I mean, because it allows you to stop seeing the same mons. It allows you to kind of compete with other things. Like that's the whole purpose of tiers. And like a lot of people really they don't grasp it too well. Like I mean, I saw a dude yesterday. He said that tiering is boring, and I'm like, how? Like, it allows you to be able to use your favorite and compete. Like, I mean, like I said, I've been playing long enough to where I'm not going to bring something like you're not going to see me bring what's a trash mon right now.
Tug
Uh,
tomorrow or whatever.
I don't even know what that is. But
The
like,
yeah.
oh, the little hedgehog looking thing.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't bring that in OU unless it was designed to actually it could be competent and balanced there instead of like not being a hindrance. And like a lot of people, well, it worked low ladder and like I made people rage quit. You got to understand, like it's a ladder. So if you're at the bottom and you're making people rage quit, it's because they're at kind of like that same equal level as you.
Yep.
And that's where a lot of people they kind of get that misconception when they do actually try and ladder and they get like one battle in and they're like, yeah, smoking players are bad. They just rage quit. And I'm just like, yo, like what are you talking about? Your showdown number is what like you're 1000 and like 22 elo like you haven't seen like competent players because I mean it's when you start playing more it's really not that hard to get on the ladder and it's just
Yeah.
one of those things of like keeping yourself like current with the meta and constantly battling because like for me like I mean I think my highest peak ever I was number 7 and that was in like XY.
Mm.
But like at the same time, it's like I have diminished because I'm playing less. I'm probably I am nowhere near as good as I used to be. And like I mean, I accept that, and I mean, I use this way to improve. While some people they would cling on to that for the rest of their lives. They would flex that number 7 for fucking 3 gens. And like I mean, it's not really. There's no reason to do that. And like you just gotta always constantly strive to get better. And that's kind of what I think Smogan tries to do for people that want to play singles and even for VGC, I mean, they post stuff for VGC, and like I'll see people bring up Picolytics, like use Picolytics, don't use Smogan, and I'm like, yo, like Picolytics gets their data from Smogan. It's
Yep.
just displayed in a different way. But once you say that to people, like, no, 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 that's not true. I'm like, you literally can go to the site and it shows you like showdown ladders and stuff like that, like, and it makes you realize like a lot of like the top, like I think Frank alluded to it earlier when he referenced Wolfie. I mean, a lot of like the top VGC players, they are also in a part of the smoking community. And like I said, they sit there and they see you guys bashing on smoking, and they're like, yo, like they worship me, but like they bash the same thing that I'm a part of because they don't understand. And like that's the main issue. It's just a lack of understanding. And I mean, I'm gonna kick it back to Frank. I mean, I pretty much covered almost all I had to say, but I mean, we might be having a longer talk here, but back to Frank.
Yeah. So the last thing I'm gonna mention, in regards to cartridge versus showdown, the competition is, without a doubt, from my I guess 200 plus games I've played on randoms and actually hit master rank twice in in the cartridge singles format. The showdown competition is far superior than the one in singles because singles is somewhat very limiting because you're only allowed to use 3 mons, and even in randoms, this is why I kind of have a gripe against some casual perspectives because these people want to ban everything and yet they bring those same amount of this same exact Pokemon on randoms, which is why I haven't really touched my Switch in regards to singles because every time I try to get random battles, I keep going up against Zaishins, I keep going up against Eternatus and Mars Shadows and all this stuff, which is pretty funny when they get put down like a dog in 5 minutes, but it's just not fun on playing on the
Yeah,
Switch, especially right now where like Pokemon is a very stagnant competitive game because once you're stuck with a specific metagame, until there are bans coming from Game Freak themselves, that metagame is just gonna be stale and so stagnant till the
exactly.
next generation, which unfortunately Gen 7 had that same problem with as well. Because while you're able to play singles on ranked in Gen 7, there were not really any bans, and all it takes is for you to get one good team, and everyone starts running with it. Or all it takes is for you to start ranking up. People want to talk shit about your own team, even though their teams suck, and it's just a mess in general. And or in Showdown, there's a whole I think that there's. I think you can argue that Smogon and Showdown communities are actually separate entities because people come there to play tournaments. They come there obviously just to play overall. Smogon basically is a conglomerate of different analysis of what people are using on a ladder and what's succeeding to get them to number one, or who's what team building helps you reach this certain amount of rank or whatever. And just to wrap things up, we're not here to bash casuals. We're just trying to tell you guys, hey, before you say Urshifu is not broken, before you say Mega Ray is easily counterable with someone with Ice Beam, before you say Orlando can get easily put down by a Mamoswine, you gotta understand that it goes beyond more than just an opinion. You have to formulate based on what other people are saying, and those people have to have clout or a very high standard of play. Another thing too is that while we enjoy seeing these trolling posts of banning everything, it doesn't necessarily reflect a good level of competition. Just because you beat these Facebook or Discord leagues doesn't necessarily mean you're the best in the world. Like, relax, buddy. And last but not least, um, the bashing. And I already made a video of this, like I briefly mentioned in during this recording. Um, the bashing in regards to casuals and Smogon, it's never gonna end. Like, we're not here to stop it. We're not the crusaders of Pokemon, but before you do so, just make sure you formulate your own opinion and have a very good understanding as to why Smogon exists. Because even though it is unofficial, your gym league rules are unofficial. While you want to ban everything, Smogon bans for a very specific reason, or it could be methodical. Like, they take these process or take these steps to understand. And actually, as of recently in this generation in DLC 2, Smogon has actually made surveys as to what is currently being a problem right now. And I actually participate in a couple of these surveys, and they rank Pokemon that are problematic, for example. And that's how we ended up getting 5 quick bans in a row in the beginning of DLC 2, and then the rest have just been suspect testing. So just keep that in mind when you want to play Pokemon. Like it's nice to express your opinions, but as long as they're informed and as long as you have the backing to it, whether you do suspect tests or you're ranked, I don't know, on so and so on the Switch or whatever, just come prepared because Pokemon has always been a war of just pure arguing of, oh, well, this is not broken, this is broken, or this sucks, or you suck, or you're trash. Or I'm like, well, your little Owen 180 on Master Rank doesn't necessarily mean anything to anyone. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's gonna be my conclusion right there.
But yeah, that's. I mean, it was a good talk. I mean, definitely. Hopefully, this helped you guys out. I mean, and if you do have questions, I mean, just ask in the comments. I mean, I usually check the comments pretty frequently, so I mean, definitely ask. I'll try my best to answer it, or somebody else might answer it, or I mean, ask in the Facebook group. I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking questions, and that's pretty much the purpose of this. We want you guys to want to inform yourselves. Like, we're not forcing you to inform yourselves, but we want you to have that desire if you want to get better at this game to actually get reliable information and want to just be able to get overall get better. But that's all I
Right.
got to say. And I mean, I don't know if Frank's got some closing statements, but
Yeah.
I
So
think
yeah, sorry about that. Pretty much. I will try to get more battle videos in because my channel has been lacking of that lately because I've been really focused on giveaways, but I kind of want to give the giveaways streams a break. So I'll be, if you guys interested in battling, go ahead and check out my channel. I will be posting that content very soon. And also, I like talking about Pokemon in general too, like the state of Game Freak and what's new and what's not. And you guys are interested in any of that kind of stuff, go ahead, feel free to check out my channel.
yeah, same for me. I mean, I've been posting some like replays and stuff of like tournament matches. Frank's actually in a couple of them. Just kind of give like analysis turn by turn stuff like that to kind of for people that aren't really experienced, just to kind of like see the thought process that goes into things. And like, I mean, hopefully that stuff kind of helps out with if you do decide to watch it. But that's it for me, and I think that might be it for Frank. And I mean, we're probably gonna do more of these in the future, and just stay tuned, really.